It was recently suggested to me that I check out the latest documentary by Joey Carbstrong called Pignorant. I'm going to be frank. Recently, I've been living my best life, working, traveling, learning a new language, drawing, writing stories, and dancing. So I'm really quite out of the loop. On the other hand, I'm a cheapskate, not tech crazy in the slightest, and stubborn as a mule. Pignorant is apparently only available on Amazon Prime, and I don't Amazon. Like, at all. And I refuse to. So, as much as I would like to squeeze in the viewing of this propaganda piece, put out by this very persuasive and not at all maladjusted vegan street preacher, he set it behind a paywall. While I thank that commenter for the suggestion, I guess I won't be getting around to watching it after all. I decided to check out some reactions, and I found this video by a vegan activist whose channel I haven't seen before. I liked the video, so I decided to watch more of her stuff. She has a video out where she addresses arguments that vegans make that she thinks are not great. Let's see what she has to say.
I've heard every terrible anti-vegan argument in the book, and I've debunked most of them here, but today I wanted to do something different. What are the terrible pro-vegan arguments that I wish people would stop using? Just to clarify, I'm not saying that you have to stop using these or that you should never use them. I'm just explaining why I don't like them and what I think you should say instead. When I was in high school, there was one annoying vegetarian named Brian. Now, he wasn't annoying because he was vegetarian, he was annoying for other reasons and happened to be vegetarian. One day he decided to challenge me and he said, "You can't kill an animal yourself, so why pay someone else to do it?" I remember thinking then, when I was 15 years old, that this was a stupid argument. I easily debunked it by saying, first of all, he doesn't know that I can't kill an animal. I've never tried. Maybe I could do it, maybe I couldn't. It would be impossible to know because I haven't tried. Then I told him there were many things in my life that I paid for but couldn't do myself. I can't make shirts, but I pay someone to make shirts, and I also told him that he can't grow his own vegetables, but he pays other people to do that.
I agree with her 15-year-old self here. I also find this to be a relatively weak argument. In this response, I'm starting with the foundation that a healthy, well-functioning society is a common goal we share. In order to have such a thing, we need a variety of people working a variety of jobs. Basically, we can't avoid paying people to do things for us that we may not be comfortable with. So not only is it impossible for just one person to do everything, we couldn't keep society running if everybody did the same thing. Some of these things include things we would rather people not do or not have to do, but we require them in order to maintain the health of society. I'm not a cop. I may not be able to be a cop. If I were infirm, I would not be able to be a cop, and I'm not exactly happy with the fact that cops have to put up with the crap that they have to put up with. But I bite that bullet, pay my taxes, and expect them to help me when push comes to shove.
Now that I'm no longer 15, I have even better ways to debunk this ridiculous argument. The idea that the morality of an action is determined by whether or not the person committing the crime is okay with it is absolutely bonkers. Imagine you were explaining that murder is wrong, and you said, "Thou shan't murder because thou couldn't do it to yourself." It may be true that most people wouldn't have the ability to murder someone, but that's not why murder is wrong. Murder is wrong because you're taking someone's life away from them. You're violating their most fundamental right and creating suffering all around them. Jeffrey Dahmer feels comfortable raping and murdering, therefore rape and murder is okay. What?
So let's talk about morals. From what I understand, morality is not objective. It's subjective, which means it's dependent on or it relates to something. Morals are supposed to tell us what is right and what is wrong, but for what, according to who, and why? What are rights and wrongs? The only rights and wrongs I care about are the ones that relate to what it is I'm trying to do. Basically, whatever my goal is. What's right is what helps you achieve the goal, and what's wrong is what prevents you from achieving the goal. Without a goal, I don't know what morals are supposed to do or why they would be relevant. If you don't know what a person is trying to do, how can you know which actions are best? How can you know which actions are actually going to lead them to fail at achieving that goal? Sometimes people have a common goal. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes we consider somebody's goal good, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we consider the things they do to achieve those goals good, and sometimes we don't. If a serial killer's goal is to kill people, despite whether they get away with it or not in the end, and they accomplished that, for them in their life, for the goals they set for themselves, they achieved their goal. For them, it was good. For the rest of us, though, it sucked. People are free to work towards whatever kind of world they want to live in, and luckily, most people don't want to live in such a world, so we do the things we need to do to either stop it from happening or to punish people who do those things to discourage other people from doing them. If people talk about morals as though there's some kind of universal set of laws that everybody should follow, that are inflexible or unchanging, I don't see this actually leading to a healthy, well-functioning society. This is why morals in the context of veganism mean almost nothing to me. It's like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. And sometimes people find something beautiful that I don't find beautiful. It doesn't really seem to have any bearing on anything important. So I don't necessarily base my life or my actions around morals as some kind of universal set of rules to follow or like some kind of law. And luckily, we don't base laws on morals as such, and I hope you can understand why. We don't have to use extreme examples like serial killers. We can talk about regular everyday people. Let's talk about me. For example, as a product of the first world, there are many things that I do that negatively impact other people in other areas of the world. Most people would never say that this is good. So if a person asked me to justify it, what would my justification stem from? At the moment, I have a goal of maintaining a job. But why? If I don't have a job, I won't be able to have a healthy standing in society. And if I don't have a healthy standing in society, I likely would not be able to survive. So the ultimate goal is survival here. There are things I need to do in order to ensure that survival, and one of those things is wear clothes. Money doesn't grow on trees, and neither do clothes. I don't know how to make clothes, and even if I did, I would still need to get fabric. I can't just go outside and get fabric. I need people for that. So I rely on other people to make clothes for me, but not for free, obviously. It means I have to pay them for those clothes. The way that the world is set up now, the most affordable clothes for people who don't have much money, such as myself, are of the fast fashion variety. I understand that my continued consumption of fast fashion is leading to a crap ton of pain and suffering in the world, but I need clothes in order to survive. The best way that I can offset it is by being a cheapskate and rarely buying clothes. I spent the whole of 2022, I think it was, only buying socks because come tax time the following year, I couldn't find any other clothing related receipts. I use items until the point of disrepair, and then I throw them out and buy new ones. Sometimes I continue to use them as pajamas. I figure it's the best I can do, but the harm is still being done, and I can't deny that. I won't deny it. It pretty much makes me a dick.
In the same way, buying animal products is wrong because you're violating the animal's rights and creating suffering for them. Whether or not you'd be okay with it has nothing to do with the morality of that action. Is hunting okay because hunters kill the animals they eat? All that being said, I do know some people who went vegan or vegetarian because of that argument, and I understand the point vegans are trying to make, which is that paying someone to kill baby animals for you is fucking pathetic. While I personally hate this argument because it falls apart under the slightest logical scrutiny, I do recognize that it appears to be effective.
So she also mentions rights. From what I understand, rights are a man-made concept. It's something we grant. It's not something that is inherent. The rights we grant to people are not a given. They can be taken away at any time. There's an idea that foundationally every living thing has a right to live, and I don't disagree with that. I think that bacteria that make people sick have the right to exist, the same as I think that a lion has a right to exist, the same as I think that humans have the right to exist, the same as I think that cows have the right to exist. But me thinking that humans have the right to exist doesn't mean that I won't strip a human of that right when push comes to shove. So if a human sets out to do me direct harm, not necessarily to the point of taking my life, I have every ability to reevaluate the rights I may have granted them at one point in order to ensure my well-being, and I'm not waiting around to ask for permission. The same thing goes for lions. I stay as far away from them as possible. They can do their thing, but if one of them was attacking me and I had the means to kill it, I would. If one was in the city and not necessarily attacking anyone, in order to maintain the safety of myself and the people around me, if I had the means to stop it, I would. If deadly force was required, I would use that. I believe Natalie and I are starting from two different foundations about what it means for a human to have rights and for us to subsist on planet Earth. I have tons of proof that, at least on an omnivorous diet, humans are able to subsist, but I have zero proof that humans can subsist on planet Earth eating purely vegan. And when I say vegan, I mean not consuming any animal products ever in their entire life. I understand that cows are the ideal food for humans and that animals are generally the best sources of nutrition for humans, so that is why I eat them. I understand that plants are generally toxic for humans and that is why I avoid them. I understand the consumption of both leads to animal harm, but I have to eat something. I go with the more nutritious and life-sustaining option. Also, I don't think it matters if the animal is a baby or a grown animal. I also don't care that you think it's pathetic. I'm trying to feed myself well, not please you, you understand? I would prefer to be well fed, whether you're happy with me at the end of the day or not.
First of all, we are not the only species that breastfeeds from another species. Here's a picture of a baby pig breastfeeding from a dog after her mother rejected her. There's also a dog who nursed baby tigers. I understand these are rare cases and animals don't go around regularly breastfeeding from each other, especially not when they're adults, but dogs also consume dairy too. Starbucks even created the puppuccino, which is when you go to the drive-thru, they give you some whipped cream to give to your dog. And people complain about feeding a dog a healthy plant-based diet when they're giving their dogs whipped cream. That's insane.
I also find it incredibly bizarre that any human on this planet would feed a dog whipped cream. But then again, they feed their own young whipped cream, which as far as I'm concerned should be considered a crime. The cream part is fine, it's the sugar that's the problem. The combination of the two, especially in high enough amounts at one time, is what I understand to be one of the major reasons why people are as sick as they are today. The body can only effectively use one source of energy at a time. It starts with with alcohol, then carbohydrate, the excess of which is stored as fat, then protein. Simply put, the body is not so effective at handling large amounts of carbohydrates. It actually only requires a very small amount at any given time. It is capable of producing the exact amount it needs if it's been fed fat and protein, as these are the two macronutrients that are essential to keep your body functioning well. People also tend to feed their cats and dogs plants of some sort when both of these animals are carnivores. Humans really love to play God and pretend that we can create a diet for animals without consequence. I used to have a cat named Lucio. He was insane. I couldn't afford to feed him well, and like most people, I assumed that the commercially available food was good enough. I have to imagine if he could go out and have access to mice, his brain wouldn't have been so broken. Why do I say that? The amount of mental clarity, the amount of good mental health days I've had since I've stopped eating plants and only consumed animal products still blow my mind to this day. There have been days where I simply could not stop smiling and laughing because I was in such a good mood. I always thought my resting bitch face was the default, but I feel I've never smiled so much in my life. The number of days I can exist pain-free when I spent most of my life, and we're talking decades, thinking I was meant to feel pain every day. It's a weird thing to say, but as much as I understand activism is important, there are some days where I simply feel too good to bother with making any content for this channel. I just want to go out and enjoy life because I'm genuinely capable of doing that now. I say all this to say, veganism seeks to reduce the pain and suffering of living creatures, and humans are among those. Humans have an optimal food, and that optimal food is the food that will promote the best outcomes for them health-wise. Perhaps Natalie is starting from a foundation where she discounts humans and doesn't really care whether or not they're fed well at the end of the day. She can feel however she wants. I don't start from the same foundation, so we disagree. I want humans to be healthy and happy because healthy and happy humans will equal a healthy, happy society. If this is also something that Natalie seeks, how would you propose we get there if it turns out that plants are the cause of mental and physical suffering of humans?
The main reason I hate this argument is because humans are the only species that does many, many things. We're the only species that builds rocket ships, that writes sitcoms, that jerks off to tentacle porn. I mean, maybe octopus do that. I don't know.
Do you know that humans are the only animal that drink the milk of other animals? You know what else only people do? Fly planes, make movies, call each other on the phone and tell each other how awesome milk is. What the fuck kind of goofy ass point is that?
When your argument makes it into Joe Rogan's stand-up routine, you know it's bullshit. Next, this is something you hear at Cubes when meat eaters don't want to watch the cruelty they're funding. I understand why this argument is popular because it highlights the hypocrisy of non-vegans being unable to stomach what they literally put into their stomachs. However, I think this argument misses a bigger point, which is that watching slaughterhouse footage is unpleasant and eating meat is enjoyable. I mean, not for vegans who know where it comes from, but carnists love it. They get the benefits of animal slaughter without having to deal with it psychologically. So why would they want to? However, my main problem with this argument is that you're forgetting the actual victims, the animals. You're framing the flesh as not being good enough for the meat eater when instead we should be focusing on the harm it causes to the animals. When people refuse to watch footage, I prefer to say this: if you won't watch it, how is it fair for you to pay for animals to go through it? This centers the animals and reminds carnists that they should have to watch something they're literally paying for someone else to go through.
I find this very fascinating. Thinking about something like the death penalty or assassinations, for example, if I had been alive during the Holocaust and Hitler had been caught and justice had been sought through his assassination, while I couldn't have brought myself to watch it, I would have paid money for it to happen, if I can be perfectly honest. The situation is not directly analogous, but it's still answering the same question. I also pay soldiers to go overseas and kill people in wars. I may not always agree with war, but in the case that I do, I have to admit I'm more than happy to pay them to do it. I don't think I could watch it, though. It seems like a necessary evil, because at the end of the day, we get to, in the case of war, defeat an enemy and perhaps stop them from committing atrocities. And in the case of animal husbandry, we get to ensure that humans are well fed. I don't advocate for factory farms. I don't know who does. I don't advocate for armies or wars either. It's not like I want animals to die. It's not like I want animals to go through that system. It's unfortunately the way that the world is being run right now. I'm working and saving because my goal is to retire in Hokkaido in Japan and be self-sustaining, but it's not something that can happen overnight. And in the meantime, I have to eat something. If I had power, if I were a politician, perhaps there would be something that I could do. If I had money, perhaps there would be something that I could do, but that's not the reality. I can't find myself allowing myself to starve by not eating anything, and I also can't find myself poisoning myself on a regular basis like I did in the past, especially if animals are still going to die painful, torturous deaths for the plant foods I receive. And by the way, even inadvertently through watching vegans do their street preaching, I've seen footage. I still continue to eat meat, and there are plenty of people who are on the same boat.
Sometimes I see vegans who I know for a fact are atheists making Christian arguments, and it just makes me cringe. I understand that it's important to meet people where they're at, but you can do that without lying to them. I would never make the argument that the devil is more likely to have created slaughterhouses because I don't believe in the devil. That's just as absurd as me arguing that Harry Potter would be vegan. Hermione, though, really should be vegan, and it's honestly insane that she's not. I mean, all that stuff with the house elves and she's torturing animals 3 times a day, it just makes no sense. But I consider the Bible to be fiction, so me using the Bible to argue for veganism would be absurd. That being said, if you are religious, use all the religious arguments that you want. The point is that you have to be honest with yourself and the person you're talking to. It's like when you go home for Christmas and your uncle, who only eats Popeyes and McDonald's, tells you that a vegan diet is unhealthy. You just can't take it seriously.
This was also interesting to me. I had been thinking earlier the same day I later went on to watch this video for the first time that I sometimes do hear people act as though the words that are coming out of someone's mouth somehow lose meaning depending on the person who says them. Obviously, a person will be hard-pressed to feel social pressure from a hypocrite, but at the same time, the person has to be honest with themselves about what it is that they're trying to do and the reasonable achievement of whatever goal they're trying to achieve. So if a smoker tries to get other people to stop smoking, the fact that they're addicted and may have trouble stopping doesn't matter. Even if it seems hypocritical on the surface, are they right? They could be a chain smoker. They could be smoking right as they say it. But if they recognize that you have a goal of good health, but you're considering smoking, or you do smoke, they are right when they tell you, hey, that's not a good idea. Back when I ate in a very heavily plant-based manner, I felt like crap and continued to feel like crap, worsening more and more each decade. I had to ask myself what I was doing wrong and how I could rectify that. I listened to a lot of people, including people that I thought were crackpots, to put it bluntly. Even now, I could disagree with 9 out of 10 things that they say, but that 10th thing, though, is it true or is it not true? The information should stand on its own merit, regardless of who's giving it. Also, once you discover there's a gap in your knowledge, if you care about being confident in the knowledge that you have, it's a good idea to fill that gap. It's also a good idea to be willing to accept the reality of the result, regardless if it sits well with you or not, and to be ready to make the moves that need to be made in order to rectify a bad situation.
Anytime a vegan is making an argument that they don't really believe, the non-vegan can sense it and it will discredit the vegan. Think about the salesperson who's trying to sell a product that they don't believe in. The customers can sense it and are less likely to buy. When people ask me about outreach, one thing I always emphasize is being true to yourself. Since we don't have data on what works during outreach, it makes sense to do what's honest for you and keeps you doing outreach. If you're naturally more aggressive, be more aggressive during outreach. If you're a bit more soft-spoken, then roll with that. Don't try to be someone else because it's unsustainable and it will burn you out.
I agree with her here, so let's move on.
Every time I debunk appeals to nature with Cardis, the vegans jump in with their own version. You'll hear vegans say that we're herbivores and eating meat is unnatural, and honestly, I'm not sure what definition of natural they're using. To me, natural just means something that happens in nature. Although we have somewhat separated ourselves from the natural world, we can see that our ancestors in nature did eat animals. In fact, they drove most megafauna toward extinction in order to feast on their corpses. If vegans want to argue that the meat industry today is unnatural, I completely agree. Animals are artificially bred, genetically modified, confined, and slaughtered by giant machines at a fraction of their natural lifespan. There is nothing about industrial animal agriculture that resembles anything close to what we would see in nature.
I've heard some people say that even what we do as humans in the modern world and cities is part of the natural world because we are still creatures of this planet existing on planet Earth using the resources available to us to make that happen. I'm kind of on board with the idea that what's natural is what happens more so in nature without modern technology or modern conveniences, but then it begs the question of what we consider modern technology or modern conveniences. Where do we draw the line between this is natural and this is unnatural? I think if we really try to find that line, we would see it's incredibly blurred, so it's hard for me to comment on it. There are raw meat enthusiasts who feel it's not natural for people to cook their food. It's something we have to go out of our way to do, something we haven't always had the luxury of doing. The most natural thing to do would to be just eat it raw. I understand where they're coming from. There are other people who feel as though we've been cooking food for so long that of course it's natural. If I can go outside and start a fire, kill a small animal with my bare hands, or get some roadkill and cook it over that fire, what part of that is not natural? I can't say I disagree with them either.
However, that's not the argument vegans typically make. They'll come in with sources about how we're herbivores, and the point I'm making is that it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether we're omnivores, herbivores, or frugivores when you're talking about morality. And since most people consider us omnivorous, getting into biology is a waste of time. Just debunk the appeal to nature and move on. Don't roll around in the mud trying to use biology to justify your decision making.
Yeah, we're starting from different foundations. For her, morals mean something in relation to the acquisition of nutrition, but for me, the objective facts of reality matter even at all. Unless, of course, we're talking simply about what's right or wrong in relation to a goal, morals don't matter. It's just one person giving their opinion about something you're trying to do without even knowing why you're doing it, and you didn't ask. The field of biology is what helps us understand what it is we need to be well fed, so that is why biology is relevant. There are objectively good things to do and objectively bad things to do to achieve the state of health you're looking for. My goal is for humans to be properly fed, to basically be in great health, because my ultimate goal is to exist in a healthy, happy society. There are ways to objectively ensure proper nutrition for a human, and this is what I'm motivated by. It isn't that I don't care about animals, but it just so happens that they are the natural source of food for people, and we don't really have to ask for permission to consume them. How we go about getting them on our plate, on the other hand, we can have conversations about that all day. Also, I think sometimes the message gets a little muddied because the word natural tends to trigger people. When I say natural, I'm not necessarily saying that something is good because it's natural or that it's okay because it's natural. I'm simply referring to it as the natural diet because it is natural. The same way that I would say the blue car is more expensive using blue as an attribute of the car as opposed to saying it's good because it's blue or something like that. It just so happens to be that a natural source of food for an animal is usually the best food for optimal health for that animal. It could be by coincidence, though, that the natural food of a human, that is, the food that can be found in nature that fully meets the needs of a human so much so that it allows that human to thrive as a species on planet Earth, is also the most optimal food for humans. Eating said food is only good because it promotes thriving, and thriving promotes a healthy, happy society. I'm going to be honest with you. The next portion is titled, When You Consume Animals, You Take on Their Suffering. Personally, I don't find this worth addressing. I didn't necessarily disagree with Natalie. If you want to watch that portion, you're more than welcome to. Her video is linked in the description, but for now, we're going to pick up at the next section.
I know, it's really hypocritical for me to hate on this argument because I've used it so many times and continue to use it when I advocate to university students. But the more I interact with this line of thinking, the less I like it, and here is why. Well, I don't think I really loved animals before I went vegan. I know many meat eaters who love animals more than any vegan I've ever met. I had this one friend who couldn't walk down the street without saying hi to every dog. She spent her free time volunteering and dog and cat rescues, and you could say, oh, she only cared about pets, but she was always watching videos of cute animals and talking about how much she loved them. It was really clear to me that she did love animals deeply, and she also ate meat. The reason she ate meat was because she liked the taste and she was so disconnected from the process and didn't even really think about how it had come from a living, breathing animal.
I find Natalie very honest and reasonable overall, but something about the way that she put her friend's reason for consuming meat. I'm not saying it's not true, but it makes me question human intellect. It really does. Did she think meat fell from the sky from storks or something? Because of the mainstream narrative and because many people have never seriously considered it before, I think meat eaters really do have a hard time explaining why they eat meat. I also spent a lot of time considering it, and in the beginning I made sure to decrease my consumption of meat in the meantime because even though I was agnostic, I felt the arguments on the plant-based side were stronger. At that time, I believed a lot of the information that vegans and vegetarians share about nutrition and the environment, but then I encountered people who questioned it in a very common sense way. And it really got me thinking, how can I get to the truth? I have also had to accept the fact that in reality, things weren't really mapping with my experience of how things actually are in life. So in trying to verify the things I took for granted as knowledge before, I came to realize that I didn't really know what the hell I was talking about. I couldn't really back up any of the things that I thought, especially in relation to nutrition science, and I didn't even have my own experience as proof that what I was doing to myself was working. I couldn't actually produce any useful information to back up what I believed to be the truth back then. Vegetables used to be my favorite quote-unquote food. Vegetables played center stage in almost every meal I ate at home, and I was suffering. So I did something that is basically the opposite of what I had been convinced a person should do according to conventional wisdom in nutrition because I was just that desperate. I just ate from animals. And the reality of the situation is things in my life have improved so much since that I can't imagine going back to living the way I was living before. If my goal is to be healthy and happy, I have found an objective way to get there. It just so happens to be that it requires the consumption of meat. The health and happiness is testament to the fact that I'm capable of surviving and thriving this way. And the living thing does not necessarily have to answer for the things they need to do in order to keep living. I understand that Natalie and I are starting from different foundations. She cares more about animal welfare and is willing to sacrifice things I'm not willing to sacrifice to do what she feels will help improve it. So basically, she starts with animals that are not human. I start with animals that are human, and I care about our welfare more than that of other animals. We come first. Both of these starting points are completely arbitrary. Natalie can fight for what she wants to fight for, and I can fight for what I want to fight for. Neither of us ultimately answers to anybody or anything but ourselves, and we will both continue to exercise our ability to build the kind of world we want to live in.
I also dislike this argument because of other arguments I've disliked in this video. It focuses too much on the meat eaters and not on the animals. Being vegan has nothing to do with loving animals. It has to do with justice. I know plenty of vegans who don't love animals, but they still don't think they should be tortured for a sandwich. We need to point out to meat eaters that animals deserve rights, whether they care about them or not. Chickens don't deserve rights because some people might love them. They deserve rights because they're conscious and cognizant individuals who have a vested interest in not being tortured. Whether meat eaters love them or not is irrelevant. I also think it's unfair to tell someone how they feel. If there's one thing we can't argue against, it's another person's feelings. A couple months ago, a vegan asked me if this argument is just an ad hominem, and I kind of think that it is. As vegans, we hate ad hominems. I hate when someone tells me they can eat meat because I have a cell phone, so we shouldn't be using ad hominems if we don't want them to be used. All this being said, I do know a few people who went vegan because someone told them that they can't love animals and eat them too. So this is another case of an argument that I personally don't find logical, but appears to be effective.
I received a comment on a video I made going into excruciating, needle-in-the-eye levels of detail about why I say what I say about nutrition science, the proper human diet, and so on. The person basically asked me, isn't this level of detail only for a fringe portion of the population? Based on my personal experiences in life and on this channel, and now hearing Natalie's experiences, can you really blame me for questioning the state of human intellect?
I hope this video didn't piss too many people off, and if it did, let me know why in the comments. If you want to support my work, please join my Patreon today, and otherwise I will see you next Friday.
I enjoyed the video, and I'll definitely be watching more of her content to find out more about her point of view. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you again in the next one. As always, be having a good day.